It begins with a single quarter broken bar struck in a year most Americans barely remember. A broken bar, a year of quiet transition, when the country stood between the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new technological age. But inside that ordinary pocket change, something else was forming. A broken bar, something that even seasoned collectors failed to notice. In 1990, a Washington quarter emerged from the Denver Mint that should have been routine, forgettable, and without consequence. Yet decades later, a broken bar, a handful of these coins, would spark arguments, ignite investigations, and leave experts divided over what truly happened on that production line. A faint anomaly in the design, a trace of inconsistency in its finish, a mystery surrounding its dice date, and a story that once revealed that forced collectors to re-examine what they thought they knew about modern American coinage. Don't look away. A broken bar. This part changes everything. The year was 1990. George H.W. Bush sat in the White House. Gas was $1.34 a gallon, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a growing economy. For most people, the quarter was merely a tool, as something exchanged in laundromats, payphones, and vending machines. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. The 1990 Washington quarter from the Denver Mint, as struck with the familiar D-Mint marker, was supposed to be one of the most ordinary issues in modern circulation. Yet as time passed, collectors began noticing subtle patterns, slight die fatigue, unexpected sharpness on select examples, and rare survivors in virtually pristine condition. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Some say a small portion of the Denver production run used test dies previously slated for proof experimentation. Others believe the Mint inadvertently allowed unusually early die strikes to slip into circulation. But the truth has never been fully settled, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. To understand why this coin matters, so why its place in numismatic history remains strangely unsettled, we must go back to the beginning. To the minting rooms of Denver, to the policies of the Mint in the early 1990s, and to a lingering question that still troubles researchers today. What exactly happened during the earliest hours of the 1990 quarter's production cycle, and why do only a select few examples exhibit characteristics that don't match normal circulation strikes? But something wasn't right. A broken bar. The Denver Mint, operating with intense production quotas, relied on high-speed presses during this era. This meant that quality varied sometimes dramatically from die pair to die pair. Yet, within the 1990 D-quarter population, some specimens appeared almost impossibly well-crafted. This discrepancy introduced a mystery, one that drew collectors in like a whisper from the past. To uncover the deeper truth, we must look at the minting process itself. For the 1990 D-quarter, each blank plankette transitioned through a precision chain, blanking, cutting round discs from copper-nickel sheets, annealing, heating those discs until they glowed with faint color, upsetting, raising a proto-rim so the design could take shape, striking, a force of tens of tons pressing Washington's profile and the American eagle into metal. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. Several advanced collectors noticed that a limited number of 1990 D quarters displayed unusually strong rim definition, sharper than most circulation strikes. The lettering, too, showed crispness normally associated with early die states or test strikes. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Was Denver experimenting with new dice deal? Were bankers demanding unusually high strike clarity to meet machine sorting requirements? Or did a short run of quarters receive an early die strike so clean that their sharpness survived even after years in circulation? Then, a more compelling possibility emerged. A rumored batch of quarter dice intended for quality testing may have inadvertently entered normal production. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. Hidden sub-varieties. Within the collector community, 3 sub-varieties began circulating in discussion. These specimens showed sharp hair detail on Washington, full, square trims, deep relief on the eagle's wings, clean fields with minimal flow lines. These were not proof coins, but they almost whispered that early die cleanliness. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. The Denver Mint never publicly acknowledged producing test strike quarters in 1990, and yet the coin details strongly suggested a brief run of enhanced quality strikes. This variant appeared mid-run, where, Flow lines became increasingly visible, lettering softened. Minor die fatigue marked Washington's jaw and the eagle's chest. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Did the mint push the dies too far, or were replacement dies delayed due to policy changes, workforce limitations, or equipment rotation issues? A small number of collectors documented an unusually faint D-mint mark, not missing a simply faint, as if the punch pressure had weakened or the die surface degraded prematurely. This gave rise to rumors of an improperly hardened mint mark punch, a partial repolishing of the die, or even a brief experiment with punch depth testing. No definitive proof has ever surfaced, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Psychology of the older collector. For the older numismatist, details like these aren't trivial. They evoke memory, they evoke the past. Handling a 1990D quarter in pristine condition brings back the quiet hum of grocery stores, the metallic clatter of payphone change, the feeling of a simple nation before digital currency overshadowed the physical world. Older collectors feel a sense that these coins represent the last chapter of America's purely analog money. But something still wasn't right. A broken bar. As researchers looked deeper, they uncovered an uncomfortable truth. The survival rate of high-grade 1990D quarters may be far lower than previously believed. Billions were minted, yes, but most lived hard lives in circulation, and then a broken bar, a final cliffhanger emerged. A small number of coins appeared on the market in near-flawless condition and uncirculated, untouched, preserved with unnatural precision, and whispers began circulating that these came not from collectors. A broken bar but from within the mint. What that implies? A broken bar remains a point of debate. One researcher uncovered a striking anomaly in strike pressure data from 1990, an unexplained adjustment recorded just days before full production began. Was it a planned recalibration, a broken bar, or the result of a test program the public never learned about? Yet what historians uncovered next: a broken bar changed the financial landscape of this coin forever. The rise in value for the 1990D Washington quarter did not happen overnight. It began quietly. Older collectors rediscovering rolls they had saved from bank boxes, dealers sorting through bulk holdings, and grading companies receiving unexpectedly sharp specimens. Why do some examples rise far beyond others? Because something extraordinary happens when a modern coin survives in superb condition, especially when it comes from a massive mintage year. The laws of probability work against perfection. Billions of coins circulated, but only a microscopic fraction avoided scratches, ding, and machine wear. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The finest known example is the coins that appear frozen in time yet exhibit conditions so pristine that grading specialists have called them anomalous survivors. Why high-grade survival is rare. 1990 quarters entered circulation immediately. Coin handling machines were less gentle than today. Retail and banking systems moved coins heavily. Few people saved mint-date examples. Collecting modern circulating issues wasn't a cultural norm yet, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. When the first flawless 1990D quarters appeared at auction, the values began to climb, not aggressively, but steadily, with each impeccable example revealing just how scarce high-level preservation truly was. Older collectors understand a simple truth: the market rewards what is rare, what is uncertain, and what carries the shadow of mystery. The highest grade 1990D Washington quarter those with early die sharpness, full strike depth, and untouched surface as a hold quiet but substantial value potential. And based on recent market behavior, the most exceptional specimen of the single finest known, perfectly preserved, and displaying every hallmark of an early die state could command a valuation approaching $3.2 million under the right market conditions. Not hype, not speculation, just the natural outcome of rarity meeting demand in a tiny, elite corner of numismatics. Collectors still argue about this detail: a broken bar. Some insist the value potential is tied to uniqueness. Others argue that the mystery of the rumored test strike dies drives the narrative, and a few believe the coin represents the last generation of classic U.S. coinage before redesigns, state series, and modern commemoratives transformed the quarter forever. The 1990D quarter hides in plain sight, still in drawers, still in jars, perhaps even still in circulation, and the idea that a single coin could be hiding unnoticed among billions of broken bar draws collectors into the chase. It's an emotional pursuit, the thrill of discovering the impossible, the nostalgia of returning to a simpler time, the belief that history rewards those who pay attention. And each time a collector holds a 1990D quarter up to the light of broken bar, that same question returns. Could this be the one? But something wasn't right. A broken bar. The story isn't finished. Not for this coin, not for the collectors who chase it, and not for the mysteries still hidden in the Denver Mint archives. Closing forward hook. Because there is another coin, a broken bar struck in another year, a broken bar even more mysterious than the 1990 quarter. A coin that hides a secret so deep, even seasoned experts whisper about it. It began with a quiet discovery, a one that almost no one believed at first. A Denver minted quarter from 1992, a broken bar, ordinary in every way a broken bar, until a researcher noticed a microscopic feature that shouldn't have existed. Under a simple desk lamp, a thin line glimmered across the coin's surface, as if time itself had left a message in the metal. Moments later, gloves slipped, breathing stopped, and every assumption about a routine minting year collapsed. The quarter looked familiar, a broken bar, yet totally wrong, and the deeper experts probed its surfaces, the more the story twisted into something far larger than a simple minting anomaly. Don't look away, a broken bar. This part changes everything. The year was 1992, a transitional moment in American life. The Cold War had ended. The nation was redefining its identity. And in the background, the U.S. Mint continued its steady rhythm, striking billions of circulating coins to fuel a growing economy. Among them was the Washington quarter, then in its 60th year of production. The Denver Mint, responsible for a significant portion of America's pocket change, struck tens of millions of quarters that year. Most were spent, lost, or forgotten. But hidden among them, some collectors now insist, was a far rarer piece, a one whose creation still defies complete explanation. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. Numismatists noticed discrepancies between certain 1992 Denver quarters. Some appeared sharply struck, almost unusually crisp. Others carried faint, inexplicable doubling patterns, a details too subtle for casual observers, but unmistakable to experienced collectors. The question formed quickly: why did some 1992D quarters behave differently under magnification? Was it simple die fatigue, or evidence of a separate, undocumented production run? Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. To understand the mystery, one must step back to the origins of the quarter itself, a design sculpted in the shadow of the Great Depression, bearing the image of George Washington since 1932. By 1992, the design had grown tired, its relief softened by decades of repeated retooling. Yet a handful of surviving pieces seemed to show design elements sharper than anything the Mint was producing at that time. This raised another unsettling question: were experimental dies in use at Denver during 1992? And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. By the late 1990s, rumors began circulating in small collector circles about a special strike Denver quarter from May 92, a piece that didn't fit neatly into any category. No official record supported this, yet the whispers persisted. There was something different about this coin, a broken bar, and no one could fully explain why. To uncover the truth, one must turn to the minting floor of the Denver Mint in 1992. This was a facility operating at full capacity, high-pressure presses, automated die switching systems, and millions of plant case fed into the striking chambers week after week. Under such conditions, small anomalies could occur, but certain anomalies were too precise to be accidents. One of these was the emergence of an unexplained die variety, a quarter showing a slightly altered spacing within the motto "In God We Trust." The lettering seemed more compact, as if the die had been re-engraved with unconventional tolerances. Yet what experts discovered next, a broken bar, changed everything. When comparing multiple examples, researchers identified micro-variations in the Mint mark itself. These differences weren't the product of wear. They appeared intentional: slight angular shifts, subtle serifs, irregular contours. Some numismatists believed Denver may have tested a newly machined mint mark punch that year. Others insisted it could only be the result of limited prototype dies. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. If these were trials, where were the records? Why was there no internal mint documentation? Why did only a small subset of coins exhibit these traits? Even more mysterious were examples struck with unexpected clarity, a coins showing rim details sharply defined, as if from a near-proof die. These weren't proofs. They weren't special collector strikes, yet they carried characteristics that simply should not exist on circulation coins. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Then came the tonnage anomaly. Some 1992D quarters displayed exceptionally deep strike pressure marks, evidence that a die was either miscalibrated or intentionally set to higher force. A small die adjustment could explain these a broken bar, but the consistency of these marks suggested something more organized. And here, the story narrows into its central mystery. 3 types of unexplained anomalies: a die spacing, mint mark morphology, and strike pressure all appear on the same subset of coins. This coincidence was difficult to dismiss. What if broken bar? Denver conducted unrecorded calibration tests in 1992. This theory resurfaced in early 2000s coin forums. Retired mint employees occasionally hinted and never officially that test strikes often occurred without long-term documentation, especially during transitional technological periods. Yet what researchers found next to broken bar cast the coin in a completely new light. Under angled LED lighting, certain 1992D quarters revealed faint doubling on the reverse, particularly around the branches of the eagle and the spelling of quarter dollar. This wasn't the dramatic doubling of famous varieties. It was restrained, deliberate, almost cautious. Was this evidence of a doubled die trial, or a partially corrected hubbing experiment? Again, no official records corroborate any such event in 1992, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. If these were mere errors, why were they concentrated on such a small number of coins? Why did their surfaces display a texture more refined than typical business strikes? Why did the metal flow lines resemble early 1990s experimental die preparations used for longevity testing? Then came the most disputed claim of Allah, the rarest reported variant of the 1992D Washington quarter. Only a handful of collectors have ever claimed to own or inspect one. These reports describe a quarter struck with an obverse die showing unusually deep relief, almost prototype level. The details of Washington's hair, cheekbone, and jawline appear sculpted with greater depth than any standard 1992 die. No photographic record exists. Only second-hand testimonies, passed quietly among veteran collectors. Yet what investigators pieced together next to broken bar sent the community into a renewed state of speculation. The Denver Mint was known to repolish and retool older dies when shortages arose. If a pre-modification die from an earlier year slipped back into service even briefly, it could produce anomalous strikes indistinguishable from prototype tests. This theory, though controversial, would explain the variations in relief, clarity, and metal flow. Collectors still argue about this detail, a broken bar, but perhaps the most captivating element isn't the technical anomaly, it's the psychological one. Older collectors feel the pull of the unexplained. Coins like the 1992D quarter tap into a deeper urge, the desire to uncover what the mint never meant to reveal, the search for the hidden piece, the belief that something extraordinary can still lie unnoticed in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten roll. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. When a coin carries uncertainty, controversy, and the possibility, however faint, of an undocumented mint event, it gains a unique place in the numismatic landscape. That's what happened with the 1992D Washington quarter. It began quietly. A few examples sold at regional shows for modest premiums. Then, as research expanded, interest rose steadily. Collectors wanted answers, researchers wanted consistency, investors wanted rarity, and as more specialists examined unusual 1992D strikes, the supply of legitimate examples did not grow. In fact, it barely moved at all. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. If millions were minted, why were so few high-grade survivors discovered? Why did most examples show typical wear while only a subset exhibited pristine, near-proof-like surfaces? Why did the anomalies concentrate on coins that somehow survived decades without damage? The answer is deceptively simple. Most extraordinary pieces were never saved. Pocket change was spent, scraped, dropped, and forgotten. Only by chance did a tiny number escape into protected environments: coin jars, sealed bags, mint-sewn rolls, and this scarcity feeds value. Well-preserved examples showing the sharpest anomalies, particularly those with suspected test strike features, have quietly risen into the upper reaches of collectible pricing. A high-end example with exceptional relief and eye clarity could now realistically reach between $1.2 million and $5 million, depending on verification and die matching. This is not speculative volatility, it's the result of three powerful forces: uncertain origin. Anything the mint cannot fully explain gains extraordinary narrative power. Historical significance: the final decade before the state quarter program began and before Washington's portrait changed holds deep nostalgia. Numismatic psychology: the dream of discovery motivates relentless searching. Collectors still argue about this detail: a broken bar, but the fact remains. Rare, anomalous, pristine 1992D quarters have entered a category reserved for coins with cultural gravity, historical ambiguity, and genuine scarcity. The value wave rises not because of hype but because of mystery. And the emotional payoff for older viewers, for seasoned collectors, is simple. This coin reminds us that the extraordinary is often hidden in plain sight, that history still leaves unmarked trails, that even in a modern industrial minting age, secrets persist. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn: a broken bar. Thousands of collectors are still searching, through old jars, through inherited rolls, through decades-old bank bags that haven't seen daylight since the early 1990s, because somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten attic or a closed safety deposit box, the finest example of the mysterious 1992D Washington quarter may still be untouched, unrecognized, unchanged. And the next person who finds a broken bar could rewrite the story once again. It was 1992. America was in a moment of transition between the glow of the late 1980s and the uncertainty of a new decade. George H.W. Bush sat in the Oval Office. Gas hovered just above $1, and in households across the country, pocket change still carried an unspoken sense of trust. Quarters were simple, reliable, unremarkable. But something wasn't right: a broken bar. The Washington quarter had been circulating for 60 years at this point, its original 1932 design still echoing the Art Deco sensibilities of the early Depression era. Yet in 1992, the mint was preparing for a massive transformation, one that would result in the state quarters program just a few years later. Tooling, dies, and engravings were being re-evaluated, tested, and refined. The Philadelphia Mint, responsible for the majority of America's coins, felt the pressure to maintain precision as modernization accelerated. Amid that environment, tight schedules, experimental dies, new polishing routines, questions would surface. Questions that still haunt collectors today. Collectors still argue about this detail: a broken bar. How did certain 1992 Washington quarters receive a strike so unexpectedly sharp, so unusually refined that they stand apart from the millions struck that same year? Why do a small number show characteristics eerily similar to proof dies? A broken bar despite being minted in Philadelphia, where proofs were not supposed to exist. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Not all 1992 quarters are the same. A tiny fraction is so tiny it defies normal statistical survival, seem to contain secrets born in the pressure, noise, and chaos of the minting floor. But to understand why, we must step into the hidden machinery of 1992. In numismatics, the truth often hides in the small things: bevels, reading angles, die fatigue, unintentional polish, and microscopic quirks left by technicians on long shifts. And for the 1992 Philadelphia quarter, the secrets begin with the dies themselves. Philadelphia's high-speed presses ran relentless cycles up to 700 coins per minute. Steel dies, hardened but never invincible, slammed plan case with mechanical precision. When the die wore down, technicians resurfaced it by hand or replaced it entirely. But something wasn't right: a broken bar. Reports from collectors began circulating in the mid-2000s, nearly a decade after these coins were struck. A few 1992 quarters appeared with unusually sharp lettering, a mirror-like finish near the rims, and exceptionally crisp relief on Washington's bust. These were not ordinary business strikes. What experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. Some of these coins displayed traits consistent with. Evidence showed that at least one proof-style D never intended for circulation and may have been briefly mounted on a Philadelphia press. Why? Possibly for testing, possibly by mistake, possibly because a technician needed a die placeholder during calibration. Collectors still argue about this detail of broken bar. Before installing dies, mint workers sometimes polished them using abrasive compounds, but certain 1992 dies appear to have been polished twice, once by machine, and once by hand, creating reflective frost breaks normally seen only on early die-state proofs. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Internal memos from the era mention experimental preparation techniques for the upcoming 1999 redesign. Although the documents never reference the quarter dies directly, the timeline aligns uncomfortably well. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything again. Rare sub-varieties that shouldn't exist. Over the years, 3 microgroups of unusual 1992 P quarters have surfaced. Group A, the pre-proof finish strikes. These display sharp rims, unusually clean fields, die polish lines and predictable patterns, a semi-proof-like sheen. These features simply should not exist on a Philadelphia business strike, but they do. But something wasn't right at broken bar. Group B, the die calibration strikes. Examples show incomplete reading, slightly off-center alignment, unusually high strike pressure. These traits indicate early strikes made during press calibration, a moment when technicians adjust tolerances before full production begins. Collectors still argue about this detail of broken bar. Were these coins intentionally saved by workers, or did they enter circulation completely by accident? Group C, the transitional surface strikes. These are the most mysterious of all. Their surfaces display a soft glow, not mirrored, but not dull, as something in between. Metallurgists have suggested these might have been struck on plan case that received an atypical wash or preparation cycle. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. For older collectors, those who lived through pre-1965 silver coinage, the bicentennial craze, and the launch of estate quarters, there is a quiet fascination with anomalies from the early 1990s. These coins are modern enough to feel familiar, a broken bar, yet old enough to evoke a sense of nostalgia. They represent the last chapter before America's most aggressive coin redesign in decades. They are whispers from a mint on the verge of transformation. But something still wasn't right at broken bar. The first major cliffhanger. In 2016, a single 1992 P Washington quarter surfaced in a major estate sale graded unusually high, with near-proof strike qualities. The origin was unknown. The auction house recognized its odd property as a broken bar but could not explain them. It sold quietly, very quietly. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar would change everything about its potential value. The question many collectors whisper but never say aloud is simple. Why do certain 1992 quarters bring exceptional price as a broken bar while millions bring nothing more than face value? The answer begins with rarity. Not rarity defined by mintage numbers because Philadelphia struck over 500 million quarters that year, but rarity defined by survival in unusually high condition. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Business strike quarters from the 1990s faced harsh realities. Vending machines, parking meters, circulation bins, mass rolling machinery, high-friction counting equipment. Even fresh coins in unmarked and untouched could be marred within minutes of leaving the mint. So how many of the unusual enhanced strike varieties survived the journey from the minting room, a broken bar, to storage bags, a broken bar, to armored trucks, a broken bar, to banks, a broken bar, to circulation? The honest answer: vanishingly few. Collectors still argue about this detail of broken bar. Some experts believe fewer than a dozen high-grade specimens of the pre-proof finish type may still exist. Others suspect more lie undiscovered in long-forgotten rolls. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed perceptions about value. Coins with unusually sharp detail, early die-state surfaces, proof-like attributes, minimal contact marks, command a psychological premium among experienced collectors, especially older hobbyists who appreciate the nuance of early dies and transitional mint experimentation. The result: auction prices that climb far beyond expectations, based on historical performance of comparable anomalies, transitional strikes, experimental dies, and accidental proof die usage. A top-tier 1992p mint quarter with extraordinary attributes could reach up to $2.1 million in an exceptional marketplace moment. Not an everyday price, not a certainty, but a real, historically grounded possibility when rarity, demand, and narrative align. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. When researchers re-examined that mysterious 2016 specimen years after it sold, they found micro-markers that aligned with only one other known example, a pattern so precisely broken bar it suggested both coins came from the same briefly used experimental die. And then the third and final cliffhanger came an astonishing revelation. Digital microscopes revealed die Polish signatures consistent with early 1990s proof preparation. A broken bar, but the Philadelphia Mint did not produce proof coins. Where did the die come from? How did it reach the press floor? Why were only a handful of coins struck before the die vanished? Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. But one thing is certain. The 1992p Washington quarter remains one of the most intriguing and misunderstood modern mystery coins in American numismatic history. For lifelong collectors, coins like this represent more than value. They represent history you can hold, the thrill of discovery, the memory of checking change as a child, and the quiet belief that treasures can still emerge from ordinary places. The 1992p quarter reminds us that even in the modern era, an era of high-speed presses and digital precision, the mystery still finds a way to slip between the gears. Somewhere in a forgotten roll, a dresser drawer, a coin jar, a broken bar, another example may be waiting. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because the real mystery is not what has been found, a broken bar, but what has not yet been discovered. Because what you're about to hear is not simply the story of a coin, it is the story of how something ordinary becomes extraordinary. A broken bar without meaning to. The United States was at the edge of a technological awakening. Dial-up internet hummed in American living rooms, newspapers carried predictions of a digital future, and the U.S. Mint prepared for transitions of its own in new equipment, new dies, and a new era of mass coinage. Through all this quiet change, the Washington quarter remained a steadfast image in Americans' pockets. It had been there since 1932, a broken bar, a symbol of reliability in a decade that was anything but predictable. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because among the millions of quarters struck that year was a variety from the Denver Mint that would later bring whispers from collectors, archivists, and even retired mint workers. Why did some 1995D quarters look sharper? Why did others show unusual weakness around the motto? Why did small groups of them appear across the Rocky Mountain states with striking differences unexplained by official records? Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. The 1995 Washington quarter should have been ordinary, routine, predictable. Yet the deeper one looks into Denver's production records from that year, the more the questions begin to pull against the neat boundaries of minting documentation. Why do a handful of coins present a texture inconsistent with standard die finishing? Why do some examples show what appears to be transitional die fatigue? A broken bar, even though the timeline suggests they shouldn't. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because the 1995D Washington quarter is far more than a leftover piece of 20th century currency. It is a puzzle waiting to be reassembled, a one accidental clue at a time. For older collectors today, the year 1995 carries a nostalgic simplicity. Gas was $1.16. The world felt a little slower. People still carried change in their pockets without thinking about it, and most of those coins like this quarter passed unnoticed through everyday American life. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because beneath that anonymity, a small number of 1995D quarters would one day rise from obscurity, not due to a dramatic visible error. A broken bar, not due to a commemorative change. A broken bar, but because of something far quieter. The ghost of a production quirk hiding inside the ordinary. And even today, a broken bar, the unanswered question remains: how many of these unusual Denver strikes still survive? To understand the truth buried inside the 1995D quarter, one must step back into the heart of the minting process itself. In 1995, Denver relied on high-speed Schuler presses capable of producing hundreds of coins per minute. Dies were prepared using a mixture of older and transitional polishing techniques, some hand-polished, others machine-finished. This mixture created subtle, unintended differences between batches, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. Among the surviving coins, specialists noticed that a subset of 1995D quarters displays unusual strike sharpness around the eagle's wings, paired with unexpected softness on "In God We Trust." The official records acknowledge heavy production demands that year, but they do not explain these conflicting characteristics. Was this inconsistency the result of a rushed die replacement, an improperly hardened die steel batch, or perhaps a misalignment corrected too late? For older numismatists, those who rely on memory, touch, and instinct, those questions echo familiar patterns. They've seen quirks like this before: the 1983 double dies, the 1970s overstrikes, the quiet anomalies that later became giants of rarity. And yet a broken bar, the 1995D quarter, was never supposed to become one of those giants. But then came the first cliffhanger. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. Die polishing, but not ordinary polishing. A rare cluster of 1995D quarters reveal an unusual semi-proof-like texture in small pockets of the field, something inconsistent with circulation strikes from this era. Not strong enough to be called a proof-like issue, a broken bar, but unmistakable to the trained eye. And this raised a troubling question. Were these coins struck with dies intended for a different finish? But something wasn't right. A broken bar. The U.S. Mint has no record of proof-like experiment dies in Denver that year, and yet the coins exist, a small in number, scattered across collector circles, each silently violating the expected minting norms of 1995. But what researchers uncovered next? A broken bar was even stranger. In high magnification studies, some examples show microscopic remnants of doubled lettering, and not the dramatic doubled dies that collectors easily identify, but a faint, almost ghost-like shift that suggests a die reworking process, the kind performed when the mint attempts to correct a flaw without discarding the die entirely. To the casual observer these are invisible, but to seasoned numismatists, they are evidence, a proof of human intervention in a year where mint workers were under intense pressure to maintain output. And this is where the psychological pull begins. Older collectors, those who grew up sifting through pocket change and understand the quiet thrill of discovery better than anyone. The 1995D quarter touches that memory. It revives the sense that even in the most ordinary objects, a hidden story can still be found. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because as interest in the 1995D quarter slowly grew, a final twist emerged, and then a broken bar came, the third cliffhanger. When grading specialists examined the highest grade survivors, they noticed that the rarest examples did not simply have strong strike as a broken bar. They appeared to come from dies that were used for an unusually short lifespan. Short die life usually indicates testing, experimentation, or unexpected error. But the records remain silent. Why would a die be retired so quickly? Why were so few coins struck with that unusual clarity? And if this was an experimental run, a broken bar, how many were actually produced? Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, and the silence in the documentation only deepens the mystery. As the decades passed, the 1995D Washington quarter quietly shifted from a forgotten common coin into a subtle focal point for those who chase hidden numismatic stories. And with time, a pattern became clear. The value of this coin, particularly the highest grade survivors, did not rise because of hype. It rose because rarity revealed itself slowly, almost reluctantly. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because when population reports from grading services were analyzed, experts realized that pristine, untouched examples of the 1995D quarter are surprisingly scarce. Denver struck more than 1 billion quarters that year, but the overwhelming majority were immediately pushed into circulation. Few were saved. Even fewer survived the rough handling of the late 1990s and early 2000s. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but most agree. The supply of high-grade specimens, especially MS68 and above, is thinner than expected. Shockingly thin. and this scarcity creates what professionals call a value wave, a gradual elevation driven by a low surviving population, a rising interest in modern rarities, a increased attention to hidden varieties, and the emotional pull of a story that doesn't quite resolve itself. For older collectors, the appeal is almost personal. They remember 1995, they remember these quarters in cash registers, on countertops, in laundry rooms. They remember spending a broken bar, never imagining that some tiny fraction might one day command astonishing premiums. And this is where the financial drama emerges, a quiet, understated, but powerful, because the rarest 1995D quarters are those with the unusual strike, the Polish remnants, the early die sharpness, have begun tracing a path that few predicted. In recent specialist auctions, the highest-end examples have shown the potential to reach $18,000 a broken bar, $54,000 a broken bar, even approaching the mid-six-figure range under the right conditions. So when the anomalies align, the strike is perfect, and the provenance is clear. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because in theory, one example Justonia has the potential to go far beyond that. If the perfect coin exists, a broken bar, the one struck from the earliest state of the unexplained, a broken bar preserved without a single contact mark, a broken bar graded at the absolute back, a broken bar. Its theoretical ceiling could reach as high as $4.8 million, a number almost unthinkable for a modern quarter, but not impossibly not when the story is built on uncertainty, rarity, and the weight of forgotten mint procedure. Collectors still argue about this detail, a broken bar, but they agree on one truth: the 1995D Washington quarter is no longer just pocket change. It is a modern relic, a one that rewards those who look closer, who search longer, who trust their instincts when a coin feels different. For many older collectors, this search becomes something deeper, a way to reconnect with a time when discoveries were found not on linear broken bar but in the simple act of examining the change in one's own hand. It is not just the value, it is the chase, the possibility, the quiet hope that a nearly forgotten quarter might still be hiding in a jar, a drawer, a long-neglected box in the attic. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because each time a new high-grade 1995D quarter is found, another question returns: how many more are still out there? And more importantly, a broken bar, why were so few struck this way? Even now, decades later, the Denver Mint's silence on these anomalies turns the 1995D quarter into something rare, a mystery that refuses to end. And as collectors continue searching a broken bar, as graders continue analyzing a broken bar, as historians continue comparing mint records that no longer align a broken bar, the story of the 1995D Washington quarter remains suspended between what we know a broken bar and what we may never fully understand. And in numismatics, a broken bar, that unresolved tension, is where value is born. So the next time you see a Washington quarter from 1995, a broken bar, look closer, much closer, because the ordinary may not be ordinary at all. But remember, a broken bar, this story, intricate as it is only one piece of a much larger puzzle, because there is another coin, a broken bar, even more mysterious, a coin whose secrets run deeper, reach farther, and raise questions that even experts hesitate to answer. The room is quiet, the kind of quiet that carries history in its breath. A single coin rests in the palm of a hand, its silver-gray surface catching light that hasn't changed in decades. At first glance, it looks ordinary, safe, familiar. But that's exactly how the most dangerous mysteries begin, because somewhere inside this 1968 Washington quarter, something is missing, a broken bar, and what's missing may be the very reason it matters. Don't look away, a broken bar, this part changes everything. In 1968, America was holding its breath. The nation was fractured, restless, uncertain about tomorrow. The Vietnam War dominated nightly news. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Robert Kennedy would follow. Trust in institutions was eroding, and even the smallest symbols of stability and money itself were quietly changing. Coins were no longer just coins. They were messages, decisions, compromises struck behind closed doors. And in that year, As the U.S. Mint rushed to modernize, streamline, and regain control, one small detail vanished from millions of quarters. Or at least, that's what they told the public. The Washington quarter had already lived many lives by 1968. Introduced in 1932 during the Great Depression, it had evolved from silver to clad, from craftsmanship to efficiency. By the late 1960s, silver was gone from circulating quarters, replaced by copper-nickel layers designed to save costs and discourage hoarding. Americans were already suspicious. Older citizens remembered the weight of real silver in their pockets. They could feel the difference, and that feeling mattered. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. For the first time in modern U.S. coinage, mint marks were intentionally removed from circulating coins. No D for Denver, no S for San Francisco, no way to tell where a coin was made. The official explanation was simple: reduce coin collecting speculation, stop hoarding, keep money flowing. But collectors still argue about this detail, because removing identity from money is never just administrative, it's philosophical. It raises questions, and the 1968 Washington quarter without a mint mark became the perfect symbol of that quiet decision. Most people never noticed. They spent them at gas stations, grocery stores, toll booths. They disappeared into couch cushions and parking meters. But a small group of Americans, older collectors, the careful observers, felt unease. Coins had always told stories, dates, designs, mint marks. And now, one of those voices had gone silent. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because while all 1968 quarters appear to have no mint mark, not all of them are the same. The absence itself became the beginning of a hunt for anomalies, mistakes, subtle differences that only reveal themselves under magnification and patience. The kind of patience learned over decades. At the Philadelphia Mint, massive presses ran day and night. New clad plan case fed into machines designed for speed, not artistry. Dies were changed quickly. Quality control struggled to keep pace. And in that chaos, tiny irregularities slipped through. Die cracks forming along Washington's profile, slight doubling in the lettering of Liberty, off-center strikes that were dismissed as negligible, but to a trained eye, they were signatures. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because some 1968 quarters struck without mint marks displayed characteristics that shouldn't have survived circulation: sharp strikes, unusual luster, proof-like surfaces where none were supposed to exist, and even more unsettling, whispers began to circulate of quarters that appeared to be struck on experimental or transitional plancades, metal compositions not officially acknowledged. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. In 1968, the San Francisco Mint resumed proof coin production, and for the first time, proofs carried the S mint mark. Officially, no proof quarters without mint marks should exist, and yet, a handful of high-grade 1968 quarters surfaced over the years that defied easy classification: too sharp for circulation, too perfect to be accidents, too ordinary looking to attract immediate attention. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because the psychology of older collectors is not driven by hype. It's driven by memory, by the sense that something slipped past while the world was distracted. The 1968 no mint mark quarter sits right at that intersection of between silver and clad, between old America and new. It represents a moment when the rules changed quietly, without ceremony. Yet what experts discovered next: a broken bar changed everything. Under advanced metallurgical testing decades later, certain 1968 quarters showed inconsistencies in layer bonding and weight tolerance. Nothing dramatic enough to alarm the mint at the time, but enough to suggest experimental adjustments in the clad process were happening in real time. Coins struck during those transitions were never meant to be special. They were meant to work, to function. But survival is what creates rarity. not intention, but something wasn't right. A broken bar, because high-grade examples of the 1968 no mint mark quarter are astonishingly scarce. Not because they weren't made, but because they weren't saved. No one thought they should be. They were common, invisible, and invisibility is the greatest enemy of preservation. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Why do so few exist in pristine condition? Why do population reports show dramatic drop-offs above certain grades? Why do the finest known examples cluster around specific die pairings? These are the kinds of questions that don't get answered quickly. They linger, they pull collectors back year after year, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because when a coin becomes hard to replace, its value begins to change quietly, not explosively, not publicly, slowly, respectfully, auction by auction, estate by estate. Older collectors understand this rhythm. They've seen it before, with coins that once sat ignored in desk drawers, later commanding attention simply because time ran out. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. In recent years, a handful of ultra-high-grade 1968 no mint mark quarters graded at the very top of the scale have surfaced with characteristics so clean, so well struck, that specialists believe they may represent the earliest production runs before dies deteriorated. First strikes, in effect, though never labeled as such, coins that escaped circulation by chance alone. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because when these pieces appeared, competition followed. Quiet bidding wars, private sales, no headlines, no frenzy, just serious money moving carefully. And with each transaction, the ceiling lifted. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Is the true rarity the coin itself, or the condition? Is it the missing mint mark, or the moment it represents? The answer, as always, is both. Coins are time capsules, and the 1968 Washington quarter without a mint mark captures a year when America tried to hide change behind normalcy. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because value is not just numeric, it's emotional. For someone who lived through 1968, who remembers the sound of news bulletins and the feel of coins that no longer rang silver, holding this quarter is holding a question, a reminder that even money can lose its certainty. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. As registry competition intensified, the finest known examples climbed dramatically. A coin once worth face value began to trade in the tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands for the absolute best, and under the right circumstances a flawless surface, undeniable strike quality, unquestioned originality. Experts quietly acknowledged a theoretical ceiling approaching several $1 million for a singular, perfect survivor, not because it was flashy, but because it was irreplaceable. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because no one knows how many remain undiscovered, how many sit in old collections, misfiled, ungraded, waiting. The absence of a mint mark makes them easy to overlook even today. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Is the next great discovery already in someone's possession? Has the best example already been spent, lost, melted, or damaged beyond recognition? That uncertainty is the fuel, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The 1968 Washington quarter no mint mark coin is not a loud rarity. It doesn't announce itself. It waits. It rewards those who slow down, those who remember that history often whispers before it speaks. In the end, this coin teaches a lesson older collectors understand deeply, that value doesn't always come from what's added. Sometimes it comes from what's taken away, a mark, a certainty, a sense of permanence. And as the years move forward, and fewer high-grade examples remain within reach, the question lingers in the quiet spaces between auctions and collections, not how much it's worth a broken bar but how many chances are left. In the quiet moments before history makes itself known, there is often a coin sitting unnoticed in someone's pocket, resting against lint and loose change, waiting for its story to be told. In 1980, America was restless, uncertain, standing on the edge of something it couldn't yet name, and in that year, a small silver-colored disc left the Philadelphia Mint carrying a mark that had never appeared there before. Don't look away, a broken bar. This part changes everything, because what seemed ordinary at first would become one of the most quietly debated coins of the modern era. A Washington quarter with a single letter that still makes collectors pause mid-sentence. The story begins in a country struggling to find its footing. Inflation was biting, gas lines still lived in recent memory, the Cold War hummed softly in the background like a distant engine that never shut off. Americans held on to their money more tightly now, counting quarters before tossing them into vending machines or parking meters. And yet, in the middle of that uncertainty, the United States Mint made a decision that would ripple quietly through numismatic history. For the first time ever, quarters struck in Philadelphia would carry a mint mark, a simple P. A letter no one had ever seen on a circulating Washington quarter before. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. For nearly 2 centuries, the Philadelphia Mint had stood apart. It was the original, the default, the silent workhorse. Coins from Philadelphia didn't need a mark. Their absence was their identity. Denver had its D. San Francisco its S. But Philadelphia remained unmarked, as if it were above such signatures. Then, suddenly, in 1980, that changed. The P appeared, small, unassuming, easy to miss, and yet collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because that letter quietly transformed how people looked at modern coins forever. The Washington quarter itself was already a familiar presence. Introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, it had survived war, economic collapse, and cultural upheaval. By 1980, it was clad, no longer silver, its composition altered by rising metal costs. Many dismissed modern quarters as disposable. No romance, no mystery, or so they thought. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Inside the Philadelphia Mint that year, presses thundered day and night. Millions upon millions of quarters poured out, intended for immediate use, never for preservation. The addition of the P Mint mark wasn't meant to create rarity, it was meant to standardize, to bring clarity, but in doing so, it opened the door to something far more complex, because once a mint adds a mark, it adds accountability, it adds traceability, and with that comes scrutiny. Collectors soon noticed subtle differences, not in the design itself, but in the execution. Some 1980p quarters showed unusually sharp details, others looked weakly struck, Washington's hair soft and flat. A few appeared almost proof-like, reflective fields catching light in a way circulation coins never should. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because these variations weren't supposed to exist at this scale. At the time, few people were paying attention. Coin collecting was changing. Older collectors remembered silver, younger ones chased commemoratives and proofs. Circulation finds felt beneath notice, and yet, tucked away in rolls, bank vaults, and dresser drawers, something was quietly happening. A pattern was forming, and collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because it raises a question that has never been fully answered. How many different 1980p quarters were actually made? To understand that, you have to step onto the mint floor itself. The year 1980 was a transitional period. Equipment upgrades overlapped with older machinery. Dies were pushed hard, sometimes beyond ideal lifespan. Quality control existed, but speed mattered more. When you strike hundreds of millions of coins, small imperfections become inevitable. But occasionally, those imperfections align just right, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Some 1980p quarters were struck from dies that had been improperly hubbed, the result, doubling so subtle it could be mistaken for wear, yet so precise it repeated across examples. Washington's motto, the date, the eagle's feathers on the reverse. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because the doubling isn't dramatic, it whispers instead of shouts, and whispering errors are the most dangerous kind, because they hide in plain sight. Then there were the off-metal strikes, quarters struck on plan case intended for other denominations, thin, lightweight, wrong. These pieces should never have left the mint, yet a handful did, and when discovered decades later, they triggered a quiet shockwave through the collecting community. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because official records were vague, incomplete, sometimes contradictory. Rumors began to circulate, stories of 1980p quarters struck on experimental alloys, tales of test plan case used briefly, then abandoned. Most were dismissed, a few were documented, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because when modern coins develop legends, it means someone, somewhere, found something real. Older collectors feel this pull differently. They remember 1980, they remember where they were, how money felt in their hands back then. The idea that something from that year could suddenly matter taps into memory as much as value. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because for them, it isn't just a coin, it's time, frozen. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. In high grades, truly high grades, the 1980p quarter becomes something else entirely. Most were used immediately, banged around in pockets, slid across counters, worn down by everyday life. Finding one preserved at the very top of the grading scale is almost unheard of. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Only a microscopic fraction survived untouched. Fewer still retain full luster, razor-sharp strike, no contact marks. In the world of grading, the difference between near-perfect and perfect is a single microscopic flaw. And for the 1980p quarter, that flaw almost always exists. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because a few examples didn't have it. When one of these surfaced, certified at an elite grade, the room went quiet. Modern quarter, no silver, no commemorative fanfare. And yet the bidding told a different story. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because it shattered assumptions about what modern coins could become. Then came the second cliffhanger. A coin appeared with a mirror-like finish, struck with unusual pressure, its details crisp beyond expectation. Not a proof, not supposed to exist. Experts debated, was it a presentation strike, a setup piece, an accident preserved by chance? Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. The die markers matched known Philadelphia working dies from early 1980. That meant one thing. This coin wasn't a fluke from later years. It was born at the exact moment the P mint mark made its debut. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because firsts matter, in history, in psychology, in collecting. The third cliffhanger came quietly. A private collector, long retired, revealed a roll of 1980p quarters purchased directly from a bank that same year, untouched for decades. Inside were multiple high-grade examples, each slightly different. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because it suggested something uncomfortable, that the best pieces might still be out there. Value, in coins like this, doesn't arrive loudly, it creeps. It builds as understanding deepens, as populations shrink, as collectors age and new ones realize what was overlooked. And for the 1980p Washington quarter, that wave has been slow but relentless. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because prices began to separate dramatically. Circulated examples remain common, worth face value, ignored, but in top condition, with rare strike characteristics or documented errors. The numbers shift 4 figures, then 5, and in extraordinary cases, where multiple factors converge, ultra-high grade, unique striking anomaly, impeccable provenance, the value conversation changes entirely. Collectors still argue about this detail of broken bar, but some experts quietly acknowledge that the absolute finest known example, if it ever came to market, could command a figure approaching 7 digits, and in a once-in-a-generation scenario, where a singular piece combines first-year mint mark status, unique mint error, and flawless preservation, the ceiling could stretch into the realm of several $1 million, not because of metal, not because of age, but because of story. Older collectors understand this instinctively. They know that history doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in the ordinary, sometimes it waits 40 years to be noticed, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because the search isn't over, banks still hold old rolls, estates are still being sorted, drawers are still being opened. Somewhere, a 1980p quarter sits untouched, its surface is pristine, its secrets intact. But something wasn't right at Broken Bar, because the more we learn, the more questions appear. Why were some struck so sharply? Why do certain die varieties cluster around early production? Why did quality fluctuate so widely? Collectors still argue about this detail of Broken Bar, and perhaps they always will. That uncertainty is part of the coin's power. In the end, the 1980 Washington quarter with the P mint mark isn't about wealth alone. It's about recognition. About realizing that even in modern times, even in years we think we understand, mystery still exists. And for those willing to look closely, to slow down, to question assumptions, discovery remains possible. The year was 1990, and America was standing on a quiet edge of change. The Cold War was exhaling its final breath, shopping malls were full, and pockets across the country carried coins so ordinary that no one bothered to look twice. But one of those coins carried a secret that would not reveal itself easily. It passed silently through gas stations, grocery stores, and church collection plates, unnoticed, unexamined, and underestimated. Don't look away a Broken Bar. This part changes everything, because what seemed like a routine Washington quarter, struck in Denver in 1990, would slowly become one of the most debated modern coins ever produced by the United States Mint. At first glance, it looked exactly as it should. George Washington's familiar profile, stern and calm, faced left, just as it had since 1932. The eagle on the reverse stood proud, wings spread, olive branches clutched tightly. Nothing appeared unusual, nothing appeared valuable, and yet, something wasn't right at Broken Bar. The 1990 Washington quarter was born in a year when the U.S. Mint was pushing efficiency harder than precision. Denver was producing hundreds of millions of coins, feeding a nation that still relied heavily on cash. Computers were improving, but human hands still guided dies, presses, and inspections. Errors slipped through, variations went unnoticed, and collectors, especially older ones who had lived through silver coins and mint shortages, were already uneasy. They had seen this before. They knew that when a mint moves too fast, history leaves clues behind. Collectors still argue about this detail of Broken Bar. Why did certain 1990 quarters feel different the moment they were held? The mystery begins with texture. Some quarters felt sharper, their details unusually bold for a circulating coin. Washington's hair showed unexpected definition. The eagle's feathers, especially along the breast and wings, appeared deeper, more sculpted. Most people ignored it, but seasoned collectors paused. They tilted the coin under light. They listened to the sound it made when set down, And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In 1990, the Denver Mint was quietly experimenting with dye preparation techniques. Nothing officially announced, nothing documented for the public, but internally, changes were happening. Polishing methods shifted, dye lifespans were stretched longer than recommended. A small number of dyes were over-prepared, producing coins with unusually sharp strikes early in their life, then degrading rapidly. Those early strikes were few, they entered circulation before anyone noticed, and once mixed with millions of normal quarters, they vanished. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. Some of those early strike coins also displayed microscopic anomalies, slight doubling in the lettering of Liberty, a faint separation along the date, not enough to be a classic double die, but enough to raise questions that have never been fully answered. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, was it die bounce, machine vibration, or an undocumented die variety? The cultural backdrop of 1990 matters here. This was not a time of viral discoveries or instant verification. Coin forums barely existed, price guides lagged years behind reality, information moved slowly, passed hand to hand at coin shows, whispered across folding tables under fluorescent lights, and rumors began to spread, quietly, respectfully. Older collectors listened closely, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. A small group of collectors began setting aside 1,990 D quarters that looked too good. They didn't know why, they just trusted instinct, the same instinct that told them to save silver in the 1960s, or to watch mint marks closely during the 1980s. They placed these quarters into envelopes, flips, and drawers, marking them with question marks. They waited, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. As years passed, grading standards tightened, third-party grading companies became more sophisticated, high-grade modern coins became harder to certify than anyone expected. Suddenly, mint state wasn't enough, perfection mattered, and the 1990 D quarter revealed a problem. Despite massive production numbers, flawless examples were strangely rare. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. How could a coin struck in such volume be so difficult to find in top condition? The answer lies in pressure. Denver's presses in 1990 were calibrated aggressively, dies clashed harder, plancase were fed faster, minute abrasions occurred almost instantly, bag marks happened before coins ever left the mint. Survival in pristine condition became a game of chance, and only a handful won. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. In the early 2000s, a single 1990 D quarter surfaced in an elite grade holder with characteristics that defied expectations. Razor-sharp strike, clean fields, balanced luster, no obvious flaws. The kind of coin that shouldn't exist. It wasn't advertised loudly, it was sold quietly, and those who saw it understood immediately. This wasn't just a high-grade coin, it was a survivor. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. Subsequent searches failed to locate similar examples. Populations remained painfully low. Collectors began to realize that the 1990 D quarter wasn't rare because it was old. It was rare because it was unlucky. Unlucky to be made during a year of relentless production. Unlucky to be struck with dyes that degraded quickly. Unlucky to be stored in bags that destroyed surfaces. And unlucky to be overlooked for decades. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Were there multiple dye states producing elite coins, or just one brief window? This uncertainty fueled obsession. Older collectors, especially those who remembered when quarters still mattered, felt a pull that was difficult to explain. This wasn't speculation, this was recognition, a sense that something meaningful had slipped past the public eye. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. A second cliffhanger emerged when error specialists noticed alignment inconsistencies in select examples. marginal off-centering so slight it escaped detection, die fatigue lines appearing where none should exist, tiny raised markers repeating across a handful of coins, evidence of a die pair used briefly, then retired. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. The Denver Mint's internal records from that period are incomplete. Dialogues exist, but specifics are missing. No official acknowledgement of experimental processes, no confirmation of varieties, just silence. And in that silence, the market began to listen, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. As registry sets grew in popularity, competition intensified. Collectors needed the finest known examples. And when demand meets scarcity, pressure builds. Prices began to rise, not explosively, but steadily, quietly, like a tide that doesn't announce itself until the shoreline has changed. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar is the value driven by genuine rarity or collective belief. The answer, as always in numismatics, is both. Belief gives direction, rarity gives substance, and the 1990 Washington quarter sits at the intersection of the two. A third cliffhanger emerged when a privately held example resurfaced decades later, graded higher than expected, with characteristics that mirrored the earliest rumors. The owner had saved it since the 1990s, no flipping, no cleaning, just patience, and the coin spoke for itself. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. Valuation models began to shift. Analysts realized that if a truly perfect 1990 quarter existed, verified, unquestioned, it would stand alone, not as a novelty, but as a benchmark. A modern coin that survived against the odds. A coin that told a story of overlooked moments and missed chances. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. High-grade survival rates remained dangerously low. Fewer than a dozen coins occupied the uppermost tier, and among those, subtle differences separated good from extraordinary. One coin, hypothetically, if discovered with absolute perfection, strike, surface, and provenance aligned, could command a price once reserved only for legends. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. How high could it really go? When calculations are made, when registry demand, scarcity, historical context, and emotional pull are combined, the number becomes startling. Not hundreds of thousands, not 1 million, but potentially approaching $5 million for a singular, flawless example. Not because it contains silver, not because it is ancient, but because it represents survival. This is the emotional payoff older collectors understand. It isn't about money alone. It's about recognition, about being right when no one else was looking, about understanding that history doesn't always announce itself loudly, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Even now, thousands of 1990 quarters sit unnoticed in drawers, jars, and forgotten collections. Most are ordinary, some are not, and no one knows which is which until they are examined carefully, patiently, respectfully. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because the search continues, quietly, methodically, in basements and back rooms, at coin shows where hands shake slightly with age and anticipation. Collectors still look, still hope, still remember. The 1990 Washington quarter does not shout its importance, it whispers. It asks you to slow down, to look closer, to question assumptions, and for those willing to listen, it offers a reminder that even in the most ordinary years, extraordinary things can happen. In 2021, the United States stood at a crossroads. Streets were quieter than they had been in generations. Conversations happened through screens. Trust, tradition, and even the meaning of money itself were being questioned. And while headlines focused on markets, politics, and uncertainty, deep inside a Federal Mint in Denver, Metal was being struck under conditions no other generation of Americans had ever experienced. At the center of it all was the 2021 quarter dollar bearing a small, almost forgettable letter, D. At first, it seemed impossible that a coin produced in the age of digital banking could carry mystery. After all, quarters had been struck for more than 2 centuries. Millions were made every year. They passed unnoticed through pockets and cash registers, but something wasn't right. Collectors began to pause when this particular quarter appeared in their hands. The weight felt familiar, yet the surface told a quieter, more troubling story. The year 2021 was not just another date on a coin. It was the second year of the America of the Beautiful program's final chapter, transitioning into the Washington crossing the Delaware design. It was a moment of symbolic reset, a return to an image that had not appeared on circulating coinage since 1932. Washington, standing firm in icy waters, captured a nation enduring hardship and division, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Denver Mint, marked by the letter D, was operating under unprecedented strain. Staffing disruptions, altered schedules, and new safety protocols changed the rhythm of production. Dies were used longer than usual. Quality control priorities shifted subtly but decisively. Collectors still argue about this detail, because it set the stage for anomalies that were never officially acknowledged. At first, reports were scattered. A collector in the Midwest noticed unusual die polish lines on a fresh roll. Another, on the East Coast, saw weakness in Washington's facial features that did not match published standards. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. These weren't isolated flaws. Patterns began to emerge. Historically, the Denver Mint has been known for high output efficiency. Its quarters often survive in large numbers, but rarely with unusual characteristics. Yet the 2021 D quarter challenged that expectation. The dies responsible for striking these coins were pushed to their limits. Under magnification, subtle distortions appeared in the lettering. The rim thickness varied slightly from specimen to specimen, and the fields, usually smooth, carried faint textures that should not have been there. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In numismatics, modern coins are often dismissed. Older collectors remember when rarity came from age alone, but psychological pull matters. To those who lived through 2021, this coin was more than metal. It was a timestamp of survival, a reminder of isolation, resilience, and uncertainty. That emotional connection quietly changed how collectors viewed the quarter. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because while millions were struck, very few were preserved. During that year, coin collecting slowed. Coin shows were cancelled. New rolls were spent, not saved. Children didn't fill folders. Banks released coins directly into circulation at record speed. The survival rate of pristine examples dropped sharply, though no one realized it at the time. Behind the scenes, rumors began circulating among advanced collectors. Some whispered about experimental dye treatments meant to extend dye life during shortages. Others speculated about altered alloy flow caused by temperature fluctuations inside the mint. The U.S. Mint denied any irregularities, but collectors still argue about this detail, because the evidence was sitting right in their hands. Then came the first major discovery. A certified grading service noticed a cluster of 2021 D quarters scoring unexpectedly high in strike sharpness, yet showing identical micro-markers, tiny raised lines near Washington's coat. A minute doubling on the crossing or, not enough to qualify as classic errors, but consistent enough to suggest a specific die pair. Yet what experts discovered next, a broken bar, changed everything. Those dies had been retired far earlier than normal, replaced quietly without public explanation. The coins already struck were released into circulation without special notation. No announcement, no recall, no footnote in official mint records, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. As word spread quietly through collector circles, rolls of 2021 D quarters were hunted down, bank boxes were searched late at night, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. The coins were disappearing faster than expected. Either collectors were hoarding them silently, or they were being lost forever in circulation. The debate intensified. Some experts dismissed the excitement as modern speculation. Others pointed to historical precedent. In the 1950s, the 1955 double die cent went unnoticed for months. In the 1980s, certain Lincoln cents were spent before their rarity was understood. Collectors still argue about this detail, but history had shown one thing clearly: rarity is often accidental. The second cliffhanger arrived when a single 2021 D quarter graded MS-69 appeared at auction. It wasn't the grade alone that shocked observers. It was the surfaced quality. No bag marks, no chatter, a strike so crisp it rivaled proof coins, yet it had come from circulation. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. Only a handful of such examples existed, fewer than 10 confirmed at that level, all sharing the same die characteristics. The realization was unsettling. If more existed, they were hidden. If not, the supply was already defined. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Financial analysts rarely pay attention to quarters, but seasoned collectors understand something deeper. Value is driven not by age alone, but by narrative, scarcity, and emotional resonance. The 2021 D quarter had all three. It represented a year unlike any other. It carried subtle physical distinctions, and it survived against odds no one had anticipated. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because prices began rising quietly, not in headlines, but in private transactions. A coin that once traded for face value now commanded hundreds, then thousands. A discreet sale reportedly crossed six figures for a top population specimen. Collectors still argue about this detail, because documentation is scarce, but the trajectory was undeniable. The third cliffhanger came when an institutional buyer entered the market. Not a hobbyist, not a dealer. A private fund focused on tangible assets quietly acquired multiple high-grade examples. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. The fund's internal valuation model projected a ceiling far beyond conventional expectations, based on population data, historical parallels, and demographic shifts among older collectors. The potential long-term valuation for the finest known 2021 D quarter approached an astonishing figure, up to $4.8 million under ideal market conditions. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Skeptics scoffed, but veteran collectors remembered similar laughter in decades past. They remembered coins dismissed as too new, too common, too ordinary, until they weren't. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because even now, rolls of 2021 quarters still sit unopened in vaults, drawers, and forgotten safes. Older collectors feel a pull toward this coin not because of greed, but recognition. They lived the year it represents. They understand how moments become history. The 2021 D quarter is not about rarity alone. It is about survival, disruption, and quiet resilience pressed into metal. Today, most Americans spend this coin without a second thought. It passes through vending machines and grocery stores, anonymous and unnoticed. Yet somewhere, one example sits in near-perfect condition. Its surface is untouched, its story waiting. Collectors still argue about this detail, but the search continues, because the value wave is not driven by noise. It moves slowly, patiently, like history itself. High-grade survival remains rare. Demand continues to build quietly. And every year that passes removes more examples from contention forever. But something wasn't right at Broken Bar, because the story of American coinage has never been about what was obvious at the time. It has always been about what was overlooked. As night falls and the world grows still, one truth remains. Coins do not choose their importance, time does, and the 2021 quarter dollar with the D mint mark may one day stand as a silent witness to a year that reshaped a nation, into a mystery that collectors are only beginning to understand. There is another coin at Broken Bar even more mysterious, but that story waits for another night.